The world of modern media is driven by a relentless hunger for narratives that blur the line between public duty and deeply personal choice, creating a fascinating spectacle that captivates millions across the globe. Within this grand tapestry of public interest, few institutions command as much unyielding attention as the global high society and the historic dynasties that have shaped the cultural landscape for centuries. Every whisper, every public appearance, and every subtle gesture from these prominent figures is meticulously analyzed by an audience that craves meaning beneath the surface of highly choreographed events. It is a realm where tradition constantly clashes with modernity, and where the decisions made behind closed doors eventually spill out into the public eye, triggering waves of speculation and intense debate. For those who watch these developments closely, the true intrigue often lies not in the massive breaking announcements that dominate the headlines, but in the quiet, almost imperceptible hints dropped months or even years before the world catches on. This specific report delves into one of those fascinating instances, a masterclass in subtle foreshadowing that went largely unnoticed by the mainstream press until the pieces of the puzzle finally fell into place. If you find yourself captivated by these deep dives into the hidden layers of high-profile events and the captivating stories of prominent global figures, take a brief moment right now to subscribe to this channel so you never miss our exclusive, hard-hitting investigative breakdowns. As we begin to unravel this narrative, we invite you to look past the glitz and glamour of the immediate headlines and focus instead on the delicate atmospheric details of a story that was quietly written in plain sight long before it ever became a global phenomenon. The setting for this quiet prelude was a crisp, overcast day in Birkenhead, England, back in the early months of 2019, an era that now feels like a lifetime ago given the monumental shifts that would soon follow for everyone involved. At that specific moment in time, the collective gaze of the international media was firmly fixed on a high-profile couple whose every step was being tracked with an almost feverish intensity by reporters and commentators alike. Anticipation was reaching a boiling point as the public awaited the arrival of their first child, a historic moment that promised to usher in a new chapter for an ancient lineage, though no one could have predicted the sheer volume of dramatic changes that lay just over the horizon. Amidst the sea of flashing cameras and enthusiastic crowds cheering on the streets of Birkenhead, a seemingly minor, brief interaction took place between a prominent global figure and a local family, an encounter so fleeting that it barely registered as a footnote in the evening news cycles. A mother of three, standing among the eager onlookers, watched as the visiting dignitary broke away from the standard protocol to engage in a warm, spontaneous conversation with her young children. A gesture that was initially viewed as nothing more than a routine display of public charm. He first knelt down to speak gently with her 2-year-old before turning his full attention to her 6-year-old daughter, a bright young girl whose presence seemed to spark a very specific, deliberate curiosity in the visitor. The conversation appeared light-hearted and brief to the casual observer, but as the prominent figure began to walk away, a sudden thought seemed to strike him, causing him to stop in his tracks, turn back around, and ask a highly precise, unexpected question. He looked directly at the young girl and asked her exactly how she spelled her name, specifically inquiring whether it was written with an I or a Y, a detail that seemed entirely trivial to anyone standing nearby, but carried an undeniable weight to the mother who witnessed it. This sudden, focused curiosity about a simple name spelling immediately struck the mother as something far more significant than mere polite small talk, igniting a powerful suspicion in her mind that she had just accidentally stumbled upon a deeply guarded secret or a future aspiration. In the high-stakes environment surrounding these individuals, where every single word is carefully measured and every public statement is heavily vetted, such an unscripted, highly specific inquiry rarely happens by pure accident or without an underlying personal significance. The mother instantly recognized the moment for what it likely was, a rare, unfiltered glimpse into the private thoughts and future dreams of a man who was quietly contemplating the legacy he wished to build, far away from the rigid expectations of his public role. Yet, at that moment in 2019, with the birth of his first child still weeks away and the gender of the baby still entirely unknown to the public, this subtle clue was quickly swallowed up by the massive roaring engine of the daily news cycle. The world moved on, the immediate headlines shifted to other pressing matters, and the quiet encounter in Birkenhead was temporarily forgotten, buried under a mountain of subsequent controversies, institutional shifts, and historic public announcements. It remained a dormant piece of a larger puzzle, a hidden fragment of a story waiting for the perfect moment to resurface and reveal its true profound meaning to an unsuspecting public. Only now, looking back through the sharp lens of hindsight and connecting the dots across a span of several years, can we fully appreciate the atmosphere of quiet anticipation and deliberate planning that defined that fleeting moment on a chilly English afternoon. It serves as a powerful reminder that the narratives defining high society are often woven from these exact threads of quiet intent, where personal desires are carefully nurtured in secret long before they are ever unveiled to a global audience of millions. The passing of time has a unique way of turning seemingly minor coincidences into monumental historic milestones, and as the years rolled forward from that overcast afternoon in Birkenhead, the hidden significance of that brief interaction began to materialize in the most spectacular fashion imaginable. The global audience, which had spent years dissecting every public statement and analyzing every shift in the family dynamics of this prominent couple, was suddenly thrown into a state of intense anticipation as news began to circulate that their lives were about to change once again. The couple had undergone a massive, historic transformation, shifting their entire existence across the vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, leaving behind the rigid, centuries-old framework of traditional public duty to forge an entirely independent path in the sun-drenched coastal landscapes of California. This profound shift in geography and lifestyle meant that the arrival of their second child would be handled in a manner completely separate from the highly orchestrated, strictly timed protocols that usually govern the births within their historic lineage. There would be no immediate public appearances on the steps of a historic London hospital, no synchronized artillery salutes echoing through the capital city, and no formal, typed announcements displayed on wooden easels outside the gates of a historic palace. Instead, the world was left to wait in a state of heightened suspense, knowing that this birth would represent a definitive declaration of independence, a deeply personal moment shielded from the relentless glare of the international press corps. When the definitive announcement finally broke on a quiet Sunday, revealing that the birth had actually taken place 2 days prior on a Friday morning, it sent an immediate shockwave through the global media landscape, instantly dominating breaking news broadcasts and social media feeds worldwide. The brief, formal statement revealed that a healthy baby girl had been safely delivered at the Santa Barbara Cottage Hospital in California, a serene and private medical facility far removed from the intense pressure cooker of the British media environment. But it was not the mere fact of the birth that captured the collective imagination of millions and triggered an avalanche of analytical commentary. Rather, it was the stunning, emotionally charged revelation of the names chosen for this newborn child. The parents announced to the world that their daughter would be named Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor. A choice so laden with historical weight, deep emotional resonance, and complex family politics that it instantly became the subject of intense global debate. By choosing these specific names, the couple had not merely selected a beautiful combination of sounds for their newborn daughter. They had deliberately woven together two of the most powerful, iconic, and fiercely protected legacies in modern history. The name Lilibet was a direct, deeply intimate tribute to her great-grandmother, the Queen, representing a highly private, affectionate childhood moniker that had been coined when the young princess could not yet properly pronounce her own name. This pet name had been used almost exclusively by her immediate family, including her father King George VI and her late husband, making its public bestowal upon a child born in California a highly charged and fascinating development. The second name, Diana, was an undeniable, profoundly emotional homage to her late grandmother, the Princess of Wales, whose tragic and untimely passing decades earlier continued to cast a massive, enduring shadow over the entire global consciousness. The combination of these two names created an immediate, palpable tension, as the world tried to decipher the true intent behind a choice that managed to simultaneously honor the head of the historic institution and its most famous, tragic rebel. For some observers, the name was viewed as a beautifully crafted olive branch, a tender and thoughtful gesture extended across a vast geographical and emotional divide in an effort to heal the painful rifts that had dominated the headlines for months. It was seen as a way to maintain a deep, unbroken thread of familial love and historical continuity, ensuring that the newborn girl would forever carry a proud connection to her ancestral roots despite growing up thousands of miles away. However, within the high-stakes, hypercritical arena of public commentary, others interpreted the choice in a far more controversial light, viewing it as a daring, highly provocative move that laid claim to an incredibly private piece of family history without obtaining the traditional, formal clearances. This underlying friction transformed a joyful family announcement into a complex media battleground, where every detail of the birth was weaponized by opposing factions to either praise the couple's deep devotion or criticize their perceived disregard for established protocols. Amidst this swirling storm of global speculation and rising tension, the mind of the public inevitably flashed back to that forgotten day in Birkenhead, suddenly illuminating the true nature of the mystery that had begun 2 years earlier. The mother who had watched the prominent figure question her daughter Lily about the spelling of her name felt an immediate, overwhelming sense of validation as the pieces of the puzzle perfectly locked into place. It became blindingly obvious that this name choice was not a spontaneous, reactive decision made in the heat of a modern media dispute, or a calculated public relations maneuver designed to shock the world. Instead, it was a deeply cherished, long-held aspiration that the father had been quietly carrying in his heart, nurturing the dream of a daughter named Lily long before he had even welcomed his first child into the world. This revelation added a layer of profound personal determination to the narrative, showing a man who was quietly but fiercely planning the future of his own private family dynamic, completely independent of the massive public storms that would eventually surround him. The tension between the rigid expectations of his historic background and his fierce desire for personal autonomy was perfectly encapsulated in that single beautiful choice of a name. As the world continued to debate the cultural and institutional implications of Lilibet Diana's arrival, the atmosphere grew increasingly complex, setting the stage for a deeper look into the lives, the histories, and the enduring legacies of the individuals who found themselves at the very heart of this extraordinary global story. The deep, systemic significance of the arrival of Lilibet Diana Mountbatten-Windsor extends far beyond the immediate charm of a newborn baby, anchoring itself instead into the shifting sands of modern cultural history and institutional evolution. To fully comprehend why this specific moment resonated so profoundly across the globe, one must examine the complex biographies and defining life paths of the principal participants who stand at the center of this unfolding drama. Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, has spent the entirety of his life operating under an intense, unrelenting public spotlight, a circumstance that inevitably forged his fierce determination to protect his private family from the heavy burdens he experienced during his own youth. His trajectory from a young prince, navigating the rigid confines of traditional expectation, to a husband and father demanding the absolute right to chart an independent course, is one of the most thoroughly documented personal transformations of the modern era. Beside him, Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex, brought a distinct, highly modern perspective to this ancient lineage, utilizing her background as a successful American actress, digital creator, and vocal advocate for social justice to re-examine the traditional role of high-profile public figures. Her transition into this historic sphere was marked by an unprecedented level of global media scrutiny, an intense pressure cooker that ultimately solidified the couple's collective decision to prioritize personal well-being and familial privacy over institutional conformity. The deliberate choice to raise their children in the coastal enclave of Montecito, California, represents a complete break from traditional precedents, establishing an entirely new model for how future generations of prominent families might navigate their dual identities on a truly global stage. Within this sun-drenched, protective environment, the young girl who carried the weight of two historic names began to grow up far removed from the strict public appearances and formal protocols that had defined the childhoods of her paternal ancestors. This geographic separation allowed her parents to carefully curate the glimpses shared with the outer world, ensuring that her early years were defined by regular childhood experiences rather than the flashbulbs of an expectant international press corps. The Australian Women's Weekly, the emotional core of this entire narrative, remains deeply tethered to the enduring memory of her late grandmother, Diana, Princess of Wales. A figure whose iconic status and tragic life story continue to exert an immense influence over the global consciousness decades after her untimely passing. Analysts and family biographers have frequently noted that the choice of the name Diana was not merely a passive act of remembrance, but a profound statement of emotional alignment and deep personal devotion from a son who has consistently sought to honor his mother's legacy. This connection became even more fascinating as the young girl grew, with her father publicly sharing that he observed striking physical and behavioral similarities between his daughter and his late mother, noting the distinct Spencer family traits that seemed to have bypassed other branches of the family tree. The revelation that the young girl possessed bright blue eyes and a gleaming coat of reddish-gold hair instantly captured the imagination of commentators, who viewed these physical markers as a beautiful living continuation of the Spencer lineage in the heart of California. Meanwhile, the primary name, Lilibet, served as an unbreakable, highly intimate bridge back to the very pinnacle of the historic institution the couple had departed, honoring the childhood nickname of Queen Elizabeth II. This complex interplay between honoring the absolute head of the ancient system and celebrating its most famous transformative rebel created a multi-layered narrative that kept the international public entirely spellbound. It demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of legacy, showing that even while forging a completely separate existence across the ocean, the couple remained deeply committed to preserving the profound personal relationships that existed beneath the grand formal facade of public office. The naming process itself, which began as a quiet, inquisitive question on a street corner in Birkenhead years earlier, had successfully culminated in a living symbol of historical synthesis, blending ancient tradition with modern independence. The Australian Women's Weekly Show 2. The narrative took another dramatic turn with the inevitable passage of time and the profound institutional shifts that occurred on the global stage, most notably the ascension of King Charles III to the historic throne. Under the long-standing legal frameworks established more than a century prior by King George V, the grandchildren of a reigning monarch are automatically entitled to the formal titles of Prince and Princess, a rule that immediately applied to the children residing in California upon the change in reign. This technical transition sparked a fresh wave of intense media analysis as the public waited to see whether the independent couple would choose to adopt these traditional, high-status titles for their children within an American context. The answer came clearly during a private family milestone in early 2023, when a formal statement regarding the child's christening officially referred to her as Princess Lilibet Diana for the very first time, a designation that was subsequently updated on the official registries of the historic institution. This official styling as Princess Lilibet of Sussex represented a fascinating cultural paradox. A young girl holding a traditional, centuries-old title of nobility while living a remarkably private, modern life as a dual citizen of both the United Kingdom and the United States. Observers noted the extraordinary historical uniqueness of her position, pointing out that as a senior figure in the line of succession born on foreign soil, she represents a truly unprecedented fusion of traditional heritage and modern global reality. Her upbringing in California, characterized by outdoor activities, family vegetable gardens, and private celebrations, stands in stark contrast to the highly formal, strictly managed public lives of her overseas cousins, creating a compelling study in contrasting lifestyles within the same historic family group. The Times of India Show 1, as we look back at the entire arc of this extraordinary story, from the fleeting, easily missed encounter in Birkenhead back in 2019 to the joyful celebrations surrounding her milestone 5th birthday in the summer of 2026. The true power of the narrative becomes entirely unmistakable. It is a story that illustrates how deeply held personal dreams can be quietly carried through times of immense public upheaval, major geographical relocations, and complex institutional conflicts, finally emerging into the light exactly as originally intended. The mother who first suspected the significance of that spelling question all those years ago could never have fully envisioned the grand, global scale of the story she had briefly touched. A story that would eventually capture the attention of millions worldwide. Today, the images shared by her family reveal a bright, independent young girl exploring the gardens of her California home, wearing simple summer dresses and interacting with nature far away from the heavy anxieties of the public gaze. She stands as a unique testament to a modern era where identity is no longer strictly confined by traditional borders or centuries of rigid protocol, but can be consciously shaped by parents who choose love, privacy, and personal autonomy above all else. The journey of Princess Lilibet Diana is far from complete, but its opening chapters have already written a completely unprecedented page in the annals of modern history, ensuring that her name will forever evoke a